Welcome to Season 5 of the Long-Winded One podcast. Listen as we showcase original work from top Royal Road authors read by professional voice actors. Hear interviews from your favourite lit RPG and game lit authors. Lastly, listen as the Long-Winded One tries his hand at his first ever lit RPG novel, The Four Treasures.
So welcome everybody back to another episode of The Long-Winded One. With me tonight, I have another fantastic Royal Road author who goes by the pseudonym AlloraLee. I'd like you to welcome Ali to the podcast.
Hi, I'm doing so good. So glad to be here.
So the way we're going to do this is I have a series of questions to ask you. Feel free to make this as conversational as you like. We're looking to learn more about you and learn more about your work, if that works for you.
That sounds amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're from. If there's anything in the past that specifically has influenced your writing, that would be good to know too.
Okay. Yeah. So I am from a small town in Florida. I am an accountant by day. I write in my free time at night and on the weekends. But it's been my hobby since I was a kid. Really, it all started whenever I was really young. I just loved all the fantasy worlds that I would read about in books. And so when I stopped reading, when I stopped finding what I liked in what I was reading, I started writing my own stuff. And a lot of that is like dark fantasy. It's stuff that covers mental health and things like that. And that has really inspired me to keep going with Otherworldly, my story. And that's really what it focuses on the most is, you know, the mental health aspect of going from world to world, right?
Yeah. So do you find now that you're writing more that you read less, or do you still try to keep up your reading as well?
So I try to keep up my reading, but I'm definitely reading less. I'm about to say I'm not reading at all. I still read books like Super Supportive on Royal Road, books like I reread The Mother of Learning pretty regularly, and that's a hefty one to go through. But I really don't read a lot in my genre anymore. I don't read a lot of lit RPG or game lit. I've just found that this is going to sound conceited. I like my writing best for that genre. And I like my own storylines. And I always get worried that seeing other people's systems, I'm going to feel like my system is lesser. So I just try to stay away from it now.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. In trying to write my own, I've noticed that I actually, on my way to work, I can't listen to audiobooks anymore because I feel like it somehow derails me. Derails. I don't know what it is, but I get it.
Yeah, so it's like that creative process that you start, it can be interrupted by other creativity, and you don't want to like stop your own progress in the name of enjoying something else when you can do something totally different and it doesn't stop your creative process.
So back to lit RPG and game lit, how I know you mentioned some of the things that you are have read, and we'll include those links in this episode's description. But could you tell us like how you came to this, like to write in the world of lit RPG and game lit?
So it all started when I was reading The Wandering End by Pirate Abba. I think that's how you say it. And that's this massive epic that is still ongoing to this day. It used to be hosted on Royal Road, and that's how I found it. I was already reading The Wandering End on my Kindle, and they had mentioned that it's hosted for free online, and it was hosted for free online on Royal Road. And so once I was on Royal Road, I'd finished what was there for Wandering End at the time. Practical Guide to Evil was also there by Eradika Errata. And that was the second system-like book I ever read. And then I just kind of became a deep dive from there. And while I was reading these, I stumbled upon a book called Candlelit Lives, which is by Luda305, and it is like a serial reincarnation with a system. And that is honestly one of the ones that inspired me the most to write. Even and later on, they left a review on my work, and it was a whole thing that we'll get into. But yeah, and so those are some of the ones that really like started my journey into lit RPG.
Well, I was going to ask more about that, but it sounds like you have some other things to say later in the interview about like whether you keep in touch with these authors. So I'm happy to touch on that now, or we can touch on it later. It's up to you.
So, I still read The Wandering Inn, as it's updated. Those updates are humongous. They have like 15,000 words every chapter. It takes it, and they put it out like 3 times a week, 4 times a week, if I remember correctly. Practical Guide to Evil, I believe, is finished now, but yeah. And then Candlelit Live is on a hiatus, but I've read all of it. But I actually the reason I know Luda 305, I don't know them personally. They left a review on one of my story, Otherworldly, and it was actually when I first released it. It was a negative review, and I agreed with it so much, it kind of never left me. So when I rewrote Otherworldly and re-released it, I messaged Luda305 and was like, "Hey, would you be willing to like update your review for the new story?" And they did. And it was positive this time, and I'm forever grateful for that because it really helped reaffirm my confidence because I held them in such high esteem, and it was just really really nice of them to do. They didn't have to do that.
So my next couple of questions we've touched on already. So the first question was going to be, how did you discover Royal Road, which I think you touched on already. You're welcome to elaborate on it, but if you also kind of want to talk about what made you take that step to decide to publish on Royal Road, that would be great to hear.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always written on and off since I was 10 years old. I've always been someone who's writing, so it's not like I wasn't already writing, but I kind of found what I wanted to read wasn't really on Royal Road, and I wanted to read what the emotional implications would be of a transmigration or an isekai or whatever you want to call it, a reincarnation, anything in a new world that isn't your own, where you've lost all your family, all your friends, your pets, your casual acquaintances, your video game scores, everything you've ever known and loved is gone. And a lot of them just kind of write it off in like one or two sentences, like they spent 3 months being sad, but they don't show any of it. Or they just say they were a loner and they didn't really care about anything, which even people who are loners care about something, and they'll still have lost that thing that is so important to them when they go to this new world. And I just wasn't seeing a lot of it. Some do it really well, like Monroe. Monroe is all about getting his cat back. He goes through hell and high water to get his cat back, and it is so well done, the emotional trauma, that it is one of my personal favorites. But there's just not a lot that go into it because a lot of people don't want to read that, They don't want to read the nitty-gritty of pulling yourself up from a deep depression, of grief, of losing that. But I wanted to read it, so that's what I wrote.
So overall, how has the experience been on Royal Road?
So I would say the first time I published Otherworldly, it was kind of 50-50. It was a mixed bag. But the second time I published Otherworldly, when I was confident in my work, when I didn't mind the negative comments, honestly, a majority of it was positive, and it still is a majority positive. I still get really supportive viewers that comment first on my chapters, or they race to get there and they debate in the comment section, and it's so fun, and they join the Discord, and it's a community that you build around something you create. I honestly really like Royal Road, the way it's set up, the way Kana does all of the updates, and I read most of the stuff I read is on Royal Road, so I've had a really great experience overall.
So a question. I just noticed some of the authors that I follow. It looks like maybe they started with Royal Road to sort of build a following, and then created a page. It seems to me that they created a Patreon page to sort of capitalize on that following so that they could then further their writing. Does that ring a bell with you? Was that your kind of progression, or is that your, plan for the future?
Yeah, so I do have a Patreon. I periodically order physical copies of my book that I sell on Patreon, Etsy, and soon to be TikTok Shop. Um, I I'm not looking for a publisher. I have not thought about it for Otherworldly specifically because of its niche take on a niche genre, right? So I never had the interest to sell it, to put it on Kindle Unlimited or anything like that, to take away from its access for free. So my Patreon is all advanced chapters. I have 70 lovely beans on there right now, and I think another 30 that follow it for free that just follow it for updates. And they're all wonderful. I love them all dearly. They're so kind in the comments and in the Discord and things like that. And they help me to be able to order art, to be able to order the physical copies of books, things like that. Like, so I was able to commission the book one and book two covers from one of my favorite artists, Zaya, on Twitter. Um, and I was able to get exactly what I wanted. And this is a side thing. A lot of people don't like it because it looks creepy, but I'm obsessed with my covers. So this is the whole thing. A lot of people think that you have to want to market your book. You have to want to do those things. I I just like it existing, right? So I'm not really like looking for a publisher. Maybe one day I will. Maybe on a different project. I actually have a specific project that I'm working on in addition to Otherworldly that I will eventually try to sell to a publisher. It is also gamelit. It's a little bit less crunchy than Otherworldly with all the system notices and the stat blocks and things like that. So it's a little bit more widely received.
You've been in this market, you've been in this world for a while now. What kind of advice would you give an aspiring writer, uh, for somebody who wants to break into, writing lit RPG or game lit, and putting it on Royal Road or putting it on a site for others to read?
I would say know the general plot that you would like. Sorry, this is a side note. I'm a discovery writer, so I don't always have everything plotted out. But know where you want to take it and then let yourself find the details along the way, because one of the specific um, parts of the lit RPG genre that gives you freedom versus like a traditional high fantasy or traditionally published work, um, a web novel like what I write gives you that freedom to meander in your plots and explore everything thoroughly. And I would say give yourself the liberty to do that. A lot of people think that meandering is bad, but in this format, when you're posting chapter by chapter on Royal Road or on a similar place like Scribble Hub or whatever, um, it's not a negative to give the readers a glimpse of the wider world, right? Even if it's first person, like I write in first person, it's all from the perspective of the protagonist. It's all Nora's point of view. It's her internal monologue. It's her view of the world. It's everything. So I include interludes periodically to give a wider view of the world. And I would say that's like really what a lot of readers enjoy, is seeing a world that's alive.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I actually can't write if I have too much of it planned out. It's like it's not interesting to me.
No, I so agree. I so agree. It's about finding it along the way for me. It's a journey as well. So I don't know. I agree.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. This is a question I've kind of had in my own writing. If you're posting every chapter as you write it on a place like Royal Road, what happens in 5 chapters if you want to go back and change something? Is it, do you feel limited by like, oh, I just had, I've had 10,000 people read that chapter. I can't change it now.
So that is something that's debated amongst me and my friends who also publish on Railroad, because I have no problem going back and changing it. But I'll put like an edit at the front, like, hey, if you haven't read it before a certain period of time, reread it. I'll put an announcement. On Patreon, there's a function to send it out as an update to people who've already read it. It's notify patrons that it's been changed. And so I put it out both. So I put it out as I write, but I have a backlog of about 15 chapters on Patreon. So everything on Patreon is just setting it up, right? It's hasn't been fully edited. It's just out there as I write it. But so I don't do it immediately. I used to. And then it was always like, oh my gosh, well, now do I change it? Like, what does that mean? Or do I just change it going forward? I actually got trapped in a plot that I wasn't thrilled about for a little bit until I just eventually went back and I was like, you know what? These people, I'm just changing it. They'll enjoy it better this way. No one wants this plot, not even me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like you have a built-in rough draft system and a group of people that will help you edit. I mean, it's right. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure.
On Patreon, they love to find inconsistencies. It's their favorite pastime. And it's my favorite pastime to be able to go and fix them because it's like free little editors. They're my beta readers, my friends, my readers all in one. I love them. They do half the work for me.
All right. So the next question, before we get to the reader questions, is what are some of the things that go into designing a lit RPG system? Could you tell us about your process?
Yeah. What doesn't go into it? Okay. You have to go through, if first of all, if you've read a lot of lit RPG, you know that the system is integral to the plot line. And if you have an overcomplicated system, you have to keep up with that throughout the entire story. You can't just suddenly like ignore it, like at chapter 75, whenever it's like 8,000 skills and abilities and all that. You have to keep an active track of it. So you have to decide if you want experience, if you want stat points, if you like ability scores, if you're a D&D player, if you want skills that level, skills that are have a rarity amount, like uncommon, whatever, if you have a class system, you have to make all these decisions at day one because as soon as you make them, they're locked in for the story. It's supposed to be integral to the plot line, so you really have to be careful about what you do. Like I have a pretty expansive system in lit RPG system in my book. It covers class abilities, general abilities. It's all the skills are tiered, so there's first, second, and third ranks so far. There's 8 different ability scores you can have. There's classes, and those classes are tiered by rarity and by actual tier, first, second, and third. It's very complicated, and I've kind of gotten myself into a whole thing, but I enjoy it. So it is an integral part of my plot, so it's something I enjoy to update and to keep track of. But it's a lot. Yeah, I have lots of spreadsheets.
Oh, so I was wondering about that. When you first introduce whatever you're introducing, do you have it mapped out through level 3 or through whatever?
Yeah, so I knew up to level 20. So she's currently at level 12. So it's important to note when my book started, she immediately got 12 levels. And she didn't even use the system until I want to say like the 5th or 6th chapter, which is kind of late in a lit RPG to use a system. There were system notices in the first chapter and stuff like that, but for me, the system was a point of grief, like a point of agitation for my main character. So I wanted to make it as unintuitive as you could get, which created a lot of problems for me because now I have to track in like 8 different spreadsheets everything that happens. But
So you're a spreadsheet user. I got you.
I am, well,
Yeah.
I'm a Google Sheets user.
Google Sheets. Okay. All right.
Everything I do is in Google Docs.
All right. We have some questions from some of the folks. Are they on your Discord?
They are on my Discord.
Okay. And so I'm going to read the question. And if you want to not only answer it, but to maybe explain the question a little bit, if you had a back and forth with the person who is asking the question, does that work for you?
Yeah, it does.
All right. So question one is, how do you create characters and what comes first in character creation for you?
Okay, so I start my character creation process with an idea of like if I want them to embody what spring is, that's where I start. If I want them to be friendly and kind, that's where I go. But I build out so much more than that. They get whole backstories, even if they show up even if they show up for like 10 seconds in 2 chapters, 3 chapters, they get something definitive about them that is different than everybody else. And that's why a lot of the reviews I get compliment how fleshed out my side characters are, which is really nice to hear. But the person who asked this specifically is asking about some of the knights that I use, and the character creation for the knights that protect our main character is that they're the different types of protectors you can have as a child and around you in your life. Like, not everyone is going to be a kind protector, but they are there for you. Or not everyone who is motherly is going to be a good protector, you know? So that is specifically what Snappy was talking about. Sorry, Snapdragon is the one who asked that question. And yeah, and so I kind of start with an idea. I usually have a mood board or something. I have a little notebook that I jot down, almost like D&D style. I jot down their alignment, what they look like, things like that to help me keep track. Because I have so many side characters, it's almost an ensemble cast.
Your
Even though,
bonds, your ideals, your
yeah,
flaws.
basically.
All right. Well, question two from your readers is, are you a plotter or a discovery writer? And we may have touched on this just a bit already.
We did touch on this a bit, and I think I even used the term discovery writer when I was speaking, because I remember when my reader actually gave me this question, I was like, oh, I'm a discovery writer for sure. Or if you've ever done NaNoWriMo for November, they call it a plotter or a pantser. Um, and I am definitely a pantser. I'm up by the seat of my pants. I I have major plot points, but if I have too much detail in my outline, I won't write it. I just won't. It's because it's boring to me. Once I know what happens, it's boring to me. So I am a discovery writer. I don't even know what happens past I think I'm on chapter 57 right now on Patreon. Past chapter 57, I have major plot points. I know who lives, who dies, all that stuff, but I could not tell you what they're doing in the forest next week. Don't know.
I mean, I don't know how anybody really knows all that stuff. And I think if if they tell you that they have all of that stuff, planned out, that I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah, like how do you have like a side character appear in a coffee shop and you know exactly what they say, but it was like 30 chapters ago that you wrote that down? I don't believe you.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to say that, but thank you for saying it for
Yeah,
me.
no, I don't believe you.
Yeah. So now we're going to get to the phase of the interview where we're going to start asking about the piece that we're going to hear. So we had a very talented narrator named Melissa White who read a 10-minute snippet. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what we're going to hear.
Okay. Yeah. So, Otherworldly, to give you a baseline, is about a woman. She's strong, stable, she's supported. She's kind of thrust into the body of a young girl, Eunora Dawn, in a fantasy world. And so, what you're going to hear is the abridged version of chapter one, which is the transition from her old life to her new life and kind of the trauma associated with that. And it's definitely more of a lit RPG. I mean, it has system notices, it has levels, it has extremely detailed stat boxes, things like that. But it's, yes. So, what you're about to hear is Melissa, who did a wonderful job. taking on the voice of both an adult woman and a child, becoming one, basically.
So we're kind of at the end of the interview now, and I would very much appreciate it if you could help us link to all of the things that you've references, all of the things that you've read, all of the authors that you've liked, all of the things that we've talked about. Because if people have enjoyed this interview and enjoy your work, they're going to want to probably go to those links. And so this is the point where I ask you to share all of your socials, your websites, your Patreon, everything, so that we can find you.
Yeah, so I have a website on WordPress called AlloraLeeWrites.com, and I'm also on TikTok as AlloraLee. It's one word, and I, of course, can also be found on Patreon as AlloraLee Writes, and then on Royal Road as AlloraLee, one word. But I don't really do Twitter or Instagram for my books, and this is a pseudonym, so I prefer to keep it separate a little bit.
Understandably. Allie, thank you so much for coming. We've enjoyed having you, and we hope that people are going to enjoy the clip of Otherworldly.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It was really great to talk about my writing and to really get through all of the topics that we covered. And, Melissa does a great job, so please enjoy.
Thank you for joining us down this Lit RPG deep dive. Please consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts and visit us over at longwinded.one, where you can see past episodes and find all of our socials, even our new Discord server. We hope you enjoy.